Greetings and welcome to episode 4 of Sunday Design Rants with me, Slicedlime. This is a series where I spend my Sundays using my 10 years of game development experience to rant about design aspects of games, new and old alike. Today we're going with old. We're looking at the third Zelda game ever released, A Link to the Past, and what I consider to be the best Zelda game ever released. There is perhaps something to that because in 2013, 22 years after the release of this game, Nintendo released a sequel called A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. A game that in many ways plays exactly like this one and still got almost universally very good reviews. My brother and me spent an enormous amount of time playing the old Zelda games for the NES, and starting A Link to the Past for the first time was a magical moment. The graphics and sound were amazing. That might seem silly now, compared to today's games, but back then it was a jump in quality. You could hear the rain on the roof inside the building, and when you stepped outside the sound changed. We marveled at it, and then dove right in. And dive right in is exactly what you do. Contrast this to many modern day action-adventure games with their long, spelled-out tutorial sections. A Link to the Past makes no attempt to tell you what to do. It simply lets you stay in bed until you figure out that pressing the directional buttons controls which way you walk. And then of course the room contains a bunch of interesting objects, and the nature of human curiosity drives the player to walk up to them and press any and all available buttons. And so we learn to open containers. What follows is pretty obviously a tutorial section. You're closed in by soldiers standing guard, but nothing is really telling you what to do or where to go. And so when you find your way to the castle and to the secret passage outside the walls, this feels like an exciting achievement. And then the game starts handing you stuff. You find your uncle who gives you a sword and a shield, and you get a quick pop-up message about which button to press, and then you're on your way. The brilliant part here is that the first enemies you encounter are almost entirely ignorant about your presence, which gives you plenty of time to fumble around while learning the controls. And while this could be called a tutorial in the modern sense of the word, it's not really any difference from how the rest of the game works. You get an item, find out how to use it with a quick text message, then you get the opportunity to start using it. As much as possible is left to player exploration rather than detailed explanation. You learn to fight by introducing soldiers that don't attack you until you attack first. You learn what taking damage is as another type of soldier is introduced. You learn that falling off platforms is a dangerous thing that can be used to defeat enemies in a section where enemies are cleverly placed to patrol up to the edge, giving you an almost irresistible opportunity to knock them over. You learn that some doors require keys, that some doors only open once all enemies in the room have been defeated, and then that sometimes finding the key to a door requires going into another part of the dungeon. None of this is explained, it's all there in small enough pieces that it ends up feeling just like the most natural puzzle solving in the world to a player. The feeling of completing the tutorial section isn't one of being ready for the game, it's a feeling of achievement for already playing the game. And this isn't because A Link to the Past is less complicated than a modern game. While you start out empty-handed, through the course of the game you'll gather a whole array of weapons and gadgets, all with unique uses in defeating enemies and solving various puzzle elements, an amount of stuff to rival many modern games. Those gadgets are all gameplay systems that consistently remain useful through the rest of the game. Contrast this to the more recent Zelda games and you'll find why I like this one so much despite its age. In A Link to the Past, everything you find enables and teaches you to do something that opens up further possibilities in the game. To contrast, games like Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess seem more like a collection of random minigames than they do a cohesive whole. Where A Link to the Past has a 15-minute introductory dungeon that feels exciting every step of the way, the new Zelda games have long tutorial sections of slowly unlocking your abilities to do the most basic things, usually by helping out around your village and playing minigames with the other villagers. And then we're let loose freely in an open world. Granted, you're given a map marker for the first little bit, but you're obviously encouraged to explore the map, a freedom I'm giving a very short time into the game, and one that takes hours and hours again to reach in the more recent Zelda games, to the point where I'm ready to give up and put down the controller before it happens. Obviously this freedom is limited. There are boulders in my way, fence posts I can't traverse, a river I can't swim, and so on. But all of those are there in the world, enticing the player to go on and find out what you could possibly get to unlock those areas. Even in the very first dungeon we played, there were fractured wall pieces that obviously hid something, that we wondered about but found no obvious way to break. But later when we get bombs and learned that fractured walls can be opened using them, we remember those fractured walls and get a reason to go back and explore areas we've been through one more time. This isn't the streamlined hand-holding of a modern Zelda game, but it's an experience that trusts the player to learn and to explore the game, and therefore puts the player in control as soon as possible, which makes this feel like a genuine gameplay experience rather than a tutorial section to grind through before getting to the actual game. Perhaps it's the case that this style of teaching has no place in a world where games need to sell many millions of units to break even, and where random people get grabbed off the street to participate in focus groups evaluating how accessible a game is. Maybe this style, where curiosity and simple trial and error drives a player to explore a game, is too much to ask in a world where competition for a player's attention is higher and as such attention spans shrink. Maybe there's no place for this style of gameplay even in new Zelda games, but I still think that this is an art that has somewhat gotten lost, as accessibility evaluations and mass market appeal drove games to add tutorial boxes for the most basic of actions, like telling a player that to move, you should use the movement key or the movement stick. The success of the sequel, A Link Between Worlds, would seem to indicate that that isn't the case, but who knows. I am hard pressed to find modern examples of this. The Dark Souls series often comes up as an example. And that might be true, but the Dark Souls games are also hard in a way that links back to the old style of NES and SNES games. And I don't think a game needs to be hard in order to encourage players to explore and learn on their own without much hand-holding. One example does stand out. A certain small game that throws the player into a procedurally generated world with a complicated crafting system and expects them to figure out how to survive, how to defeat enemies, how to mine, and how to craft. Either way, I find that I miss this type of game. One that assumed that the player wanted to play, was ready to experiment and learn to play on their own. And because of that treated the player with respect. The respect of not telling them the obvious. Thank you for listening, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know what you think about this game, about tutorials in games in general, and about this rant. My name is slicedlime. I'll see you in another video, or in a new rant, next Sunday. Bye bye.